new Republican Party Chairman Ken Buck, also Representative Ken Buck in Congress. Thanks for joining me today. The last two Republican Party chairs in Colorado didn't have much success and didn't have a day job in Congress. How will you be successful with a day job in Congress?
Well, I would disagree with you. First of all, I think that the last two Republican chairs had varied success, but I think they had some success. The last two chairs ago, Steve House inherited debt. He left. The party had money. Kept Mike Kaufman's seat, which was a tough seat in Congressional District 6. Registration had done better. This last year, you see an effect that we saw across the country with the party that is in power in both in the House and the Senate and in the White House suffering losses. The Democrats suffered losses in 2010. The Republicans suffered losses in 2006. So it is a trend that we see for over 100 years of our history in this country. But what I bring to this party chairmanship is an ability to reach out to contacts that I've developed in Colorado over 20 years. And those contacts for fundraising purposes, for outreach, for other really things that have to get the party going, that's what I am excited about doing with the state Republican Party.
So it sounds more about money? Trying to get funding?
Money is the lifeblood of politics, but I think that the Republicans have been successful in the past as a result of a ground game, and we have out-ground gamed the Democrats. They have raised more money than Republicans. They have a better funded infrastructure than we do, and I think we have to get back to our bread and butter. We have to get back to the ground game. We have to raise enough money to win, but we have to get back to our ground game if we're going to be successful in Colorado.
If former Chairman Steve House's success was funding and keeping Mike Kaufman's seat, is that alone why he's coming back?
He's coming back because there was a concern among party activists that I would spend 1/3 of my time outside of Colorado, and they wanted a stable presence in the office, and he will deliver that for us.
Why not why him, though? If more broadly, more seats weren't won under him. Why him?
Because, one, he has the experience. Having served 2 years, he's learned things that work and things that don't work, and he was free.
Available.
That's it, available. But seriously, he volunteered to step forward, and a lot of this, I'm volunteering. I'm not taking a salary from the party the way the past chairs have done, and so I was really impressed with the fact that he is in a position now in life where he can volunteer his time, and his passion is Republican politics in Colorado.
Just like in 2013 locally here in Colorado, Republicans are talking recalls of certain lawmakers. But recalls by themselves don't automatically put a Republican in that seat, even if the recall is successful. So how do recalls equal success?
So I think there is a lot of frustration as a result of Republicans or conservatives winning all of the ballot initiatives that were on the ballot in 2018 and losing many of the state legislative races and I think all of the statewide races that were on the ballot. And the message that I think the Democrat Party should have received is that voters were placing trust in the Democrat Party to move at a moderate pace. Instead, the Democrats have attacked the energy industry and have done other things with the popular vote, with gun legislation that have offended a lot of the people, unaffiliated voters and Republicans who voted for them. So I think you see this frustration rising. I don't think that recall elections are appropriate just to second guess the voters' decision in November of 2018. I do think they're appropriate when you see an elected official acting inconsistently with how he or she has run just a few months ago. And so I, as party chair, will be very careful in what we support and what we don't support when it comes to recall elections.
In your area where you live, there is a recall that has been approved. The petition's been approved for House District 50 for Representative Rochelle Galindo. Do you believe she is being inconsistent with how she ran in November 2018, that she deserves to be recalled?
Representative Galindo has been absolutely inconsistent. If you look at the the nature of the economy in Weld County in northern Colorado. It is an oil and gas economy. There are certainly, it's diversified, and there are certainly other areas of the economy that are very strong. But oil and gas is probably the predominant money maker, an income producer in northern Colorado. And so to attack oil and gas with Senate Bill 181, I believe is a mistake. And I believe that she has been inconsistent, especially after how unpopular 112 was in northern Colorado.
But is she being inconsistent with anything that she campaigned on? Did she campaign and say, I'm going to defend oil and gas, and then voted against it?
So she campaigned to represent the voters in her district, and those voters are not being represented by Senate Bill 181.
When Senate Bill 181 officially passed this week, the oil and gas industry put out a statement saying the changes made provided a degree of certainty to the oil and gas companies, but the statement from you and the Colorado Republican Party were more dire, saying the bill is the first wave of shutting down the industry. So if these new regulations don't kill the industry, do you risk looking like the boy who cried wolf?
No, not at all. I don't think anybody in the oil and gas industry thinks that this is the last step that this governor or legislature will take. They will do their best with the Colorado Oil and Gas Conservation Commission. They'll do their best with other regulatory agencies and laws that they will pass to continue to hammer on the oil and gas industry. And I think that quite frankly, you're going to see billions of dollars of investment leave this state in the next year or two, and that is going to have an economic impact. What I don't think people understand is this isn't just about oil and gas companies making a profit, and it's not just about jobs, because folks will pick up and move their families to Wyoming, to North Dakota, to Texas. What this is about is the tax base for the school districts in especially rural Colorado. It won't affect Denver as much, or it won't affect Arapahoe or Jeffco or Adams as much as it will Weld and Morgan and some of the counties that really depend on oil and gas revenue for their school districts.
I think one thing that our viewers might be confused about, and I have some questions, when it comes to Weld County, as long as the Oil and Gas Commission director approves the drilling permit, Weld County, if it's happening in Weld County, doesn't have to be any more restrictive than it is. So how does this impact Weld County if Weld County can say, as long as you've got your permit, come on?
So that's, when you say Weld County, there are 22 municipalities in Weld County, and each one of those municipalities will have a vote, as well as the county commissioners for the unincorporated areas of Weld County. The process that has been created is a process that creates a patchwork of entities. And oil and gas has no certainty on whether it starts drilling here and the community nearby all of a sudden decides that it wants to ban oil and gas drilling in the area. What we've always had before is we've had certainty because the state has set regulations that oil and gas is complied with. The harshest regulations in the country are in Colorado. And oil and gas was, although they objected to that initially, they've worked under that and have found ways to comply and actually be great corporate citizens in our community. And so to create this patchwork now where as Fort Collins moves into Weld County more and more, the people of Fort Collins that live in Larimer County that don't have oil and gas property can say we're not going to allow oil and gas anywhere to be drilled anywhere in Fort Collins. You're now dealing with communities that are really creeping into oil and gas areas.
Oil and gas, which you've mentioned, red flag you mentioned, national popular vote, all of those are potential reasons why we're hearing a possible recall against Governor Jared Polis. Do you support a recall against Polis, and will the Republican Party fund it?
Well, I'm not there yet. I haven't. I think when you're talking about a governor, there is a higher standard than a state legislator, but I will certainly take a look at it when it's presented to us.
Do you support the recall of any current state legislators? I know we talked about Galindo, but do you have any decision to, we're going to spend money on this, and I'm okay with that?
I have not made a decision about spending money on House District 50 race or any other race at this point.
House Minority Leader Patrick Neville has come out online supporting recalls. his family could benefit from recalls and elections because that's their business. Should it be appropriate for elected representatives and their families to profit off of recalls and elections?
I'm missing how their family is in this business.
By being hired for election purposes, this is an added election outside of a cycle. The idea that perhaps this is being done in a way that benefits the family's business.
So if I understand it right, Patrick's brother is a consultant and is in the business,
right.
and certainly there were some resources from the House fund that were used in the last election cycle, and his brother ran some of that political operation, and that's what you're talking
right.
about. I think that is something that Patrick and the elected Republicans in the state legislature and the state House will have to decide. It's not something that the state party will intervene in any way.
You literally wrote the book on draining the swamp in Washington, D.C. The Washington Post reported this week that since David Bernhardt joined the Interior Department, his former Denver-based law firm has quadrupled its lobbying business related to the interior. Is that draining the swamp?
It doesn't sound good. I have no idea what's involved with that. It certainly doesn't sound good, and I don't know right now whether that is something that he has any impact over. He may have impact if he is confirmed by the Senate. It's certainly one of those things where before your confirmation hearing, you don't want that issue raised.
Would that be something that you would be vocal about, even if it's passing some of that information on to Senator Cory Gardner, Senator Michael Bennet, whoever's in the process? Is that something you should be out in front of with the idea that I wrote a book on draining the swamp?
Sure. I think that both Cory and Michael read the Denver Post, as I do, and I'm sure that they are aware of those allegations. I think you've got to look beyond just the fact that there is more money being spent on lobbying Interior with a particular law firm and see exactly what the nature of that lobbying is. But it is certainly one of those things where we appreciate the media and looking at those things and making people aware of it. But I think that a lot of times people will waste money on relationships that they think produce benefit when in fact they don't produce benefit. So again, I'm not there that is swamp-like, but I am certainly concerned to hear something like that.
Does he belong? Just what you know about him, does he belong in Washington, D.C.?
Well, I don't know what you mean by belong.
To be confirmed,
I don't belong in Washington, D.C., so I don't think that's a compliment for people to say that they belong in Washington, D.C.
Does he deserve the job as Interior Secretary?
Look, I worked with Ryan Zinke for 2 years before Ryan became the Secretary of Interior, and I have to tell you, I think that the President has done a great job of picking cabinet officials. I don't know this gentleman's background. I don't know whether he's worked at Interior before and what kind of background he has that would qualify him. So I really can't tell you that I've looked in it. It isn't part of my committee work. I am on the Judiciary Committee. Happy to talk to you about Bill Barr, who I think is infinitely qualified and will do a great job of reading the Mueller report and turning over materials that will satisfy Congress.
That's a segue, what we call in the business, because I have a Judiciary Committee question, because you had a hearing this week on the Equality Act, and you asked a woman who was testifying about her and her child being refused service by a doctor because of her sexual orientation. You asked if an Orthodox Jewish doctor whose grandparent was killed in the Holocaust, if they should have to work on a Nazi. What was your point in asking that question?
My point is that we are getting right now, and it's similar to the Baker case in Jeffco. We're getting to the point where we are forcing people to conduct business that they may not want to conduct. And I think that we have to be very careful. It's not a line that we haven't crossed in the past. We've certainly crossed that line with African Americans in the 1950s, 60s, and 70s. And it was very appropriate not to have segregated lunch counters, not to have segregated buses. But we keep finding more and more groups that we are putting into a category of forcing people to conduct business with. And I think it's a risky area. I'm not saying it shouldn't occur at times, but it's a risky area. And the lady who was there said that a doctor chose not to work with her, and another doctor came in and worked with her. When I asked her if she had inferior medical care, she didn't know, but it was clear that she didn't get inferior medical care, that her child was taken care of appropriately. And I think that being able to say, I want that person to be my doctor, doesn't give that doctor any choice in who they want their patients to be. So there's a right on both sides of that we have to respect.
Do you make a distinction on who is a protected class under law? That someone who identifies as a Nazi is not a protected class?
Well, certainly their speech is protected under law, and what I meant by that is we've just got to be very careful, because we don't want people to start not conducting business or finding other reasons to conduct business. But I do make a distinction in that regard. But I think, again, when you have an immutable characteristic, when you are clearly African American, when you are clearly a woman, when you are clearly something that presents in a certain way, that is typically the protected class. Now religion is a protected class, and it's less clear in that case where somebody is. But my point was not that a doctor should be required to deal with a gay person or not required to deal with a gay person. My point is that I think we have to be very careful when we start talking about public accommodation.
Is becoming the chair of the Republican Party in Colorado a way to up your profile to run for U.S. Senate or governor?
The answer is yes, but I'm not going to do it.
Can I hold you to that? Because we're going to hold on to this now.
You can hold on to this as long as you want. I've had enough brain damage in this business. I am, I just want to make sure everybody knows that there will be a time where I'm looking for an exit strategy, and I work really, really hard. I appreciate the promo.
Thank you for joining me, Congressman.
Thank you.